Well, enough of the introductory stuff. Let's get to talking about real stuff. We're going to take just a little bit of time to talk about the prehistoric period to set us up to talking about the history of world civilizations. That word prehistoric is a word that we use in conversation kind of loosely to mean old. All right. We might say, "Oh, your flip phone is prehistoric." Okay. But it does have a very precise meaning. It does mean something very specific. It refers to a specific time. And I'm pretty sure, if you think of it for just a second, you can figure out what the word prehistoric technically refers to. Because you know the pre part of the word means before, and you only just learned that, there we go, that the word history refers to a story that's written down. So when we come back to this word prehistoric, we see that this prehistoric, the word prehistoric refers to people before they've developed the ability to write down their stories, or in other words, before they've developed a written language. That's what the word prehistoric means. It doesn't really refer to a specific time in terms of a date. What it means is a period before the people have discovered or invented the ability to read and write. So that's what that word prehistoric technically refers to. If we could go back in time, about, say, 35,000 years, we'd find ourselves in a time period that today we call the Paleolithic period. Now this word Paleolithic comes from two Greek words. Paleos means old, lithos means a rock, and so sometimes the Paleolithic period is called the Old Stone Age. It's called a Stone Age because the people made their tools out of stone. Well, wood and leather strips and stuff too. But what I mean by that is that the durable part of the tool, the hard part, the cutting edge of the tool, is made out of stone. The other way of getting at that is to say that they didn't have access to metal technology. They didn't have access to copper or bronze or iron or so on. Well, if we could go back to the Old Stone Age, back to the Paleolithic period, we would find two groups of people scattered, you want to say all over the world, really not all over the world, but all over a big part of the world, two groups of people. One group we call the Neanderthal people, and the other group we call the Cro-Magnon people. Now these names, Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, are not all that interesting in themselves. They just refer to places where their bodies were first discovered. Grombeck mentions the Neander Valley, for example, where the Neanderthal bodies were first identified. Two groups of people. How different are these groups of people? Well, that's something that is constantly under evaluation. There are definitely biological differences between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon people, and these differences are obvious. Okay. So obvious that if you knew what these differences were, and I really don't either, but if you were someone who specialized in such a thing, and you dug one up in your backyard, and if you knew what you were looking for, then you could very clearly identify whether you were looking at the body of at the skeleton of a Neanderthal person or a Cro-Magnon person. The differences are that obvious. Okay. And I should say that everybody agrees on the facts here. All right. The interpretation of the facts is different. Okay, but everybody agrees on the facts here. Okay. We have two biologically different people. In other words, their bodies are very different. Now, how significant are those biological differences? That's a big one. I'm myself not convinced that these biological differences mean all that much. I mean, they certainly are there. And again, nobody disagrees about the facts. I'm just not sure that they're all that significant. Okay. I mean, for example, one of these groups had a skull capacity much larger than the other group's skull capacity. That means that that one group had a bigger brain than the other group. So the group that had the bigger brain was obviously more intelligent than the group with the smaller brain, right? Well, that's one of those things that makes sense for about 4 or 5 seconds till you have time to think about it. Well, think about dogs. Think about a Great Dane and a terrier. Now, the Great Dane's got a brain the size of a grapefruit, and the Terrier's got a brain the size of a grape. But now you tell me, which one's smarter, a Great Dane or a Terrier? Now, if you've got a Great Dane, I'm not going to get in a fight with you about how smart your dog is, okay? But Terriers are pretty smart, all right? And you're not going to tell me that a Great Dane is super highly intelligent and a Terrier is not very intelligent at all because one has a great big brain and the other has a little bitty brain, okay? I mean, just keep your eyes open when you walk around campus. Some people got great big basketball heads, and some people got little softball heads, some people got pointy football heads. I mean, it doesn't really matter how big your head is. What matters is how you use what's inside your head, okay? And so yeah, I'm not convinced by that argument, okay, that the big brain people are smarter than the small brain people. Okay. Now, of course, there are people who would disagree with me, okay, and I'm willing to be convinced, all right. I'm just not convinced that these biological differences are all that significant than there are the biological differences between people on campus. I mean, how many ways can we divide people up by their bodies, all right? Tall people, short people, size 11 feet people, size 6 feet people, blue-eyed people, green-eyed people, those purple contact lenses aren't fooling anybody people. Um, we can divide people up in all kinds of different groups based on our bodies. And at the end of the day, all those differences really all that significant. Um, I'm not convinced. But they are very different in their culture. And that's what I think is more interesting. They're different in their culture. They're different in their ways of life. You almost want to say that they're different in their approach to life. They're different in what they want out of life. Okay, and that's very interesting. The Neanderthal people figured out pretty quickly that if you take two rocks and you bang them together, by definition, one rock will be harder than the other rock. And if you do that long enough, the hard rock will take pieces off the soft rock. And if you do that long enough in a straight line, you have a sharp edge. And then they figured out that you could take some leather strip stuff and wrap it around the rock so you don't cut yourself up. And you got a knife. Well, having a knife is pretty good. Having a knife is better than not having a knife. You've got to give me that much. And then they figured out that you could take a stick maybe this long and get some leather strapping stuff and get a knife and tie it to the end of the stick and you can, if you turn the knife one way, you have an axe. Well, having an axe is pretty good. Better than not having an axe. You have to give me that much. Or you could turn the knife the other way around, tie it to the stick, and you've got a spear. Well, spears are nice to have. They're pretty cool. They're better than not having a spear. That's pretty good, all right. But then it's like the Neanderthal people said, if you got a knife and an axe and a spear, what more do you want? You're set. You can get by. And guess what? The way these people lived, if you got a knife and an axe and a spear, well, yeah, you can get by. And getting by is pretty good. Getting by is better than not getting by. You have to give me that much. Pretty good to get by. But the Cro-Magnon people, you see, they're different. They they say, well, if you can get a knife, see, the Neanderthals say if you got a knife and an axe, you, what more do you want? The Cro-Magnon people say if I can get a knife and an axe, what more can I get? The Cro-Magnon people want more, you see. They want more for themselves. They want more for their kids. They want more than just getting by. And so the Cro-Magnon people are going to be very creative people, inventive people. They're going to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. Because if all you've been doing is getting by, and you want more than getting by, then you got to do something new. Because what you've been doing has only been getting you by. You got to do something new. You got to be open to new ideas. And the Cro-Magnon people are going to be creative, inventive. They're going to be open to new ideas. They're going to be, as Grumbitz calls them, the greatest inventors of all time.